After a successful decade run as a featured documentary, Eyes of the Mothman is now a podcast containing bonus information and, for the first time ever, the complete, unedited field interview tapes with eyewitnesses, experts, and those who were directly impacted by the Mothman incidents that occurred in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966 and 1967. Although this podcast is meant to act as a historical record and an archive of the events that transpired, all material contained here is not for reproduction without the written consent by the copyright holder, Redline Studios Incorporated. Episode 21 of Eyes of the Mothman, the podcast. Can you believe we interviewed this many people to begin with? We're on episode 21. And it's, I know, a fan favorite. The Frick brothers.
The famous Frick brothers.
We were out in West Virginia before, Neil. What's your first memory of the Frick brothers? I'm trying to remember how we got I remember now. We were talking about
We met them in the diner.
But I remember when we got out there, people would be like, you know who you need to talk to are the Frick brothers. It would happen all the time. You know who you need to talk to. You know who knows everything about Mothman is the Frick brothers. And I'd be like, oh, they must live around town. They're like, no. They live in Maryland, but they spend a ton of time out here. They travel out here because they were like a fixture of the community.
I didn't know that.
They're obsessed, probably the most obsessed fans, investigators, whatever you want to call them. They are obsessed with the Mothman and have been since day one. Talk about the original gangsters of Mothman. Forget Jeff Wamsley and Denny and everyone else we talked about. The goddamn Frick brothers probably were there since birth.
How long does it take to get from Maryland to Point Pleasant?
It's not close.
It's the very western tip of West Virginia.
It's not close.
They make appearances as the Men in Black at all these functions. Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's like, okay, you go down to the Mothman Festival. You have DVDs and posters, and maybe some people have books that have been written, or you have the Mothman. They are their own thing.
I know, right?
It's portable everywhere. They are experts that just walk around as experts.
And they've become infamous, famous, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. They're synonymous with the Mothman story. They're the only modern day mythical entity that's been able to ingrain themselves in the story. Like when the bridge fell, right? Mothman leaves, UFOs enter, but the Frick brothers enter. And then it's funny, and I'm joking around because they're good guys and they've always been good sports. And they were very nice to us. They, outside of being interviewed, they were like a walking dictionary of all things Mothman. They could tell me the longitude and latitude of where Chief Cornstalk's ceremonies took place. So
I never saw them ever without Mothman t-shirts on.
Right.
They showed up with them on.
Right. It's like if Mothman was a band, they're the biggest fans.
Right.
And you go back to the t-shirts, it's funny. It's funny. This was a moment that happened that I just laugh about in my head. Whenever I interview people, I'm always trying to, it's very important to me that everybody looks their best. It's lit the best. I never want anything to look, below its highest capability of on-camera representation. And so, when I interview somebody, I expect that you're going to get your hair cut. You're going to wear a nice shirt. You're going to do something. It's going to be a formal interview. We're going to try to make this look really good. And so most of the people, you don't really have to tell these things. They just kind of show up ready and camera ready. But I remember the Frick brothers, we interviewed them in the Low Hotel, which is, a famous hotel for being haunted. It's spooky. And the Frick brothers are obviously a little bit mysterious. But I didn't want to downplay their expertise and knowledge. It was hard to really even go what's your title? Because they're not paranormal investigators who get.
We're the Frick brothers. That's
exactly.
our title.
They're right. It's like being Hulk Hogan.
Well, first of all, this is not a slight at them. I don't remember their first names. They're the Frick brothers.
Oh, I get them confused.
They
I
are
get them confused.
one unit. They
Yes.
are just one unit
Together. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't talk about Abbott and Costello
Yes.
individually. You have to talk about them together.
Right. They're like Power Rangers. They form up their own entity
Right.
when conjoined, or like Voltron.
Well,
right?
everyone who watches a documentary that's not from Point Pleasant, the first question they ask, the very first question is, I need to know about the Frick Brothers.
Right. They want to know.
Right.
And 2 points. I'll finish the T-shirt comment, and then you make me think of another story. But when we sat down for the interviews, they're wearing a Mothman shirt, and I'm like, that's too on the nose. I don't want a Mothman shirt in the documentary, but at the same time, I don't want to be disrespectful. So I remember saying to them, hey guys, everyone else who's been interviewed has kind of been a little bit more formal. Do you have like another shirt you can change into? And I thought that was enough of like suggestion to be like, go throw on a button down or something. And they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. We can go change. And they were staying in the same hotel we were filming in. So they went up to their bedroom and then back down, and they had just changed into other Mothman shirts. They just went from one Mothman shirt to another. And I was like, oh, that's really funny and kind of cute in a weird way. Yeah. So I'm like, fuck it.
I don't think they have anything else.
Just keep the Mothman shirt
That is their
on.
formal.
It's true. It's true. And
everybody who said, you got to talk to the Frick Brothers because they're really experts. I don't know of any greater experts.
No.
That they live and breathe it. They know everything about it.
Everything. Like they could write an encyclopedia about it. And they're still doing it today. They not only know about the 1966 and 67 sightings, but it's like, first off, I'm like, how do you have money? Because like, this is like their full-time job. They're full-time Mothman enthusiasts to where like Mothman's spotted in Nebraska. They're like on it, like fucking goddamn, what do you call it? Like, who's the detective with the hat? What's the fucking Sherlock? They're like Sherlock Holmes of fucking Mothman. But to your point of like, everyone wants to know about the Frick Brothers. I don't even know if you know this, but outside of this, for 10 years, I worked in television development where I worked in reality TV where you develop shows, you pitch ideas, and a lot of times in that process, you build a show around a person. Dog the Bounty Hunter was a successful show not because someone pitched the idea of bounty hunting, but they go, hey, I found a guy in Hawaii who's got bleached blonde hair. He's got a fucking mullet. He's got tattoos out the ass. He's an ex-con. His wife is this really boisterous person. He's got this whole family of like, and that's how that show gets sold off those people. It doesn't matter what they do. They could be selling insurance, but it's Dog the Bounty Hunter. And so, as I'm going through that process, I pitched the Frick Brothers around as a television show.
And what was the reaction?
I got it sold. And then they didn't do it.
Why?
They didn't want to do it.
I don't remember
the Frick
this.
Brothers didn't want to do it?
No. They turned it down.
Why?
I don't know. I don't
remember this.
I
don't remember that either.
Like a Don Knotts style paranormal show. Like these two guys are going to go investigate stuff, but it's not going to be like.
To who? Who did you pitch to?
I can't say the networks.
Okay.
But I had got it funded through it. They loved it.
I do remember. This is all ringing a bell. This is ringing a bell.
It's killing me to tell this story.
I never heard this story.
I had sold a television show about I had the whole opening in my head. I was going to.
Did you talk to them beforehand?
Yes, they knew, and then they like a lot of people.
They reneged on it.
They reneged.
This was shortly after
they just
releasing.
Didn't want to do it.
This was shortly after releasing the Mothman. I vaguely remember it now.
And this has happened. This has happened in other iterations.
Oh, it happened
where
to me too.
I've had celebrities that I've attached to shows, and and we sold it, and then they just like, oh, I don't want to do it anymore. You're like, why?
Yeah.
And you have a contract with them, but you can't force them to be on a show.
No.
But these guys were. I had the whole opening done. I was going to have them in a box car, like a roller coaster, and then we're going through a haunted house. Like it was going to be like fun. It was like Pee-wee's Big Adventure style paranormal investigating, and I just remember. I remember having to tell the network executives that they don't want to do it. And they're like, ugh. And I tried to like save it. I'm like, well, maybe I can get some other people that are like, no. And I remember the guy going, no Frick Brothers, no show. Like, God damn it.
I mean,
it's like millions of dollars gone.
Oh, God. I mean, didn't they know how lucrative it could have been?
That's what I mean. I don't think they cared. And it's not like it's not a criticism of them.
But what was their reason not to do it?
You know what? If I had to really guess, I don't think they're extroverted people.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're introverted people. I think they do this for fun. I think they enjoy it. And to their credit, I think they kind of knew that doing something like this can often go wrong. It's true. Like reality shows have a really dark side. They ruin things. You know, they get the worst out of you. You know, I could see it happening. I could see it going, hey, you know what? You're two brothers who get along and like doing this. Well, let's have an episode where you fight and you hate each other. And like, it's just, they want Jerry Springer of everything. And I think they were worried about losing that control, which does happen. And I just think all of those unknowns scared them.
Stacey, I'm going to put you in a cooking show where you cook Greek food.
Done.
Right, exactly. It's just like that's the whole thing. If the check is big enough, you'll do anything. But it's just like you are the Frick brothers, because that's what. As I look at them, I'm like, you guys are deadheads.
Yes,
because that's what I don't know if there's a phrase for the Frick brothers of following Mothman. Is it Mothheads? Whatever they are, I don't know.
Mothman.
Mothman, yeah. But I mean, I think that's kind of what they are, and they. You know, that's what deadheads do. They wear the T-shirts. They go to every concert. They follow them around. Their whole life is being a professional fan. And that's what these guys seem to be doing. I don't know how you can have time to that they devote to this. It's not a hobby anymore. It's a career, if you will. But I don't know how you can devote that much time to it and not have it be all about you. So obviously,
isn't that why you do it? You wait for your big break.
That was the big break. I don't understand.
Crap.
I mean, you don't, especially when they're not even the ones going, hey, you should make a show about us, which everybody does, especially during the height of
especially all these paranormal people,
shows.
all these paranormal people that are like dying to have their own show.
But I mean, the whole reality show, the whole thing has passed, but I remember there was a limo driver down the street from you who wanted to you should do a reality show about limo drivers. You should about the garage I work in. And, these guys could be working at the post office and be like, pitched. Oh my God, this should be a show. And it should never be a show.
Because it's horrible.
Because it's not. But the thing is, no one ever says, oh God, I wish I knew what was going on in the back of limos. I wish I knew what was going on in the back room of the post office. No one ever says that. But when people see Eyes of the Mothman, they're like, what about those Frick brothers?
Right.
Tell me about the Frick brothers.
Because they're so mysterious. And also in our movie, it's never explained. It's like, here's this, here's these guys.
Right.
And like, you just let them be as they are. Like, and again, it's not making fun of them or criticizing them. It's like they're unique characters. Again, it's Dog the Bounty Hunter.
They're finishing each other's sentences.
That's what they were worried about, though. They were worried that they were going to come across as, weird guys. I think they just didn't want to be shown negatively on television.
But you like I said, you don't cook. You don't know how to cook. You're going to cook, I don't know, Japanese food. You've never done it before. Here's the check. Are you now a Japanese chef? Yes, you are. Of course you are.
That's, how we think.
Personality. It's just different personality.
I just think it scared them. Yeah. And it's disappointing. And man, I would have loved to have seen that come to fruition. But they just didn't want to do it. And so it just died as a project. I
never knew that. I wish you wouldn't have told me that. It makes me mad. Now it makes me not like them.
Oh, that's terrible. But, they're fascinating. And they just march to their own beat. And now, like, the thing is, too, I have not spoken to them in a long time. But for a while after, again, like, the world changed since making the movie. Social media comes up. Things pop up. And I do remember years after, they would pop up. And I would, like, the Men in Black personification that they would do, they would go around and do it. They're not just in Point Pleasant, but I started seeing them, like, they would be in like gentlemen's clubs with like strippers around them, like as Men in Black. And I'm like, what is this? I want to know about their life so much. But again, they weren't into it. Where again, you think of like reality show, it would have been brilliant.
Perfect. They're perfectly made for it, but it's just like, let me see. You ethically and morally reject a reality show, but there you are in a strip club dressed as a guy who Men in Black. Like,
no, it makes no sense.
It doesn't.
You're comfortable enough to do that, but not do the show. And I was going to call it freaking weird.
Perfect. I mean, it's perfect. Freaking everything. It would have been. Honestly, they would have been frick would have been a word in the American vernacular. I know. That would have been like, don't start fricking with me.
Exactly. I know. You think of like Real Housewives and Duck Dynasty.
Oh my God, it would have been Duck Dynasty. It would have been like a Duck Dynasty.
It would have been fricking fantastic.
I know.
Is there a third brother? Or is it just the two of them?
No, I believe, there is like another brother.
I know, but look, we went
that would
down
have been like season 2, episode 7. The revelation. There is a third.
Yeah. We are talking about all these people that we're interviewing, right? And we did do this in 2006. That's when we shot the film. So it's like, oh, do you remember this interview? And you have to kind of, maybe. Do you remember this person? Oh, yeah, in the back recesses of your memory, maybe. Do you remember the Frick brothers? Yeah, I remember the fucking Frick brothers.
Right. Yeah. How do you forget them?
How do you forget the Frick brothers?
When I look at their interview, what I got more out of it as a filmmaker was like resources, facts, and almost like fact checking. I'd be like, I would use them because I trusted it that they were an authority on this subject. I'd be like, hey, I heard the bridge fell on this day, then this was spotted. And they'd be like, no, there's this. Like they had it down.
Yeah, it was a Wednesday.
Go-to for facts. And so, they're such a staple in the Point Pleasant community. And I hope that they're still doing well. And I hope that they're still very much a part of that. I cannot think of Mothman in Point Pleasant without the Fricks.
That's a good point.
They're always there. They're always there. They're dressed as the Men in Black. They're such, identifiable. They're big, tall guys. They're just, like on another level. They're just like, they transcend.
Yes. You don't forget their name. You don't forget anything about them. It's just like, it's almost like if there was a festival, if the festival of which they've had every year for 20 years, if you went to the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and they were not there the entire time, it would be like being rained out. Like, I'm
not going to lie. I forever have gotten their first names interchangeable, wrong. Who's John? Who's Tim? Does it really matter?
Is that their names? I have no idea.
Because it's just the Frick brothers. Right. Great guys. I appreciate everything they did for our film. Every lead they gave us, every fact they gave us. It was almost too much. I couldn't even put it all in there. But they were really good sports. And even though I would have loved to have seen the Frick brothers reality show come to life, I do understand and respect their decision. And you know what? Most people don't walk away from that type of thing. And I don't know them as people outside of, this. But I do think it's, I respect people that can walk away from something and they didn't want to do it. And I was pushing hard. Though I will say I was pushing hard for them because, the network was on board and ready to go. They loved them. And, but it is what it is. It happens all the time. So I hope they're doing well. I have not spoken to them in some time, but I am going to enjoy revisiting their original interview, which is lengthy, but let's take a look out of it. This is our raw interview with Tim and John Frick, better known as the Frick brothers.
Individually, just tell me each of your names, first and last name, and then spell it for me so I can get it right later on the graphics.
Okay. My name is John Frick. It's John Frick.
My name's Timothy Frick, Timothyfrick.
Okay, good. And then usually, for these things, there's usually a title that you put with somebody, researcher or expert, things like that. I was going to put you guys down as kind of paranormal investigators.
Yeah, I'll suggest that.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
That's good.
All right, cool. And let me know too if you guys want a water or something. I got some bottles of water back there.
Okay.
What the heck is that?
Here.
A radiator.
There is some people who not feel bad.
Jeez.
No.
Okay, Cameron is. Okay, cool. All right, so my first question for you guys is I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the TNT plant.
Closer to me.
Yeah. Sorry, all this stuff's on your way too. Just try to look in my direction.
If you could just face your body and your face towards Matt.
All right.
Even those bars and shit, right? All right, so my first question is kind of about the TNT. I'm going to talk to you guys about the TNT plant a little bit. Can you guys just tell me what type of, there are contaminants and things stored in those igloos. Can you tell me about what type of things were stored in the igloos? Well, actually, let me ask you this first before I ask you that question. Not to answer for the camera, but just off the camera. For the igloos, like I had heard that like, the TNT and things like that were stored in there while the power plant was up and running. And then once it got shut down, and then later on, I heard like chemical companies and things like that rented them out to store stuff in. Is that true? Or no?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Lately, some guy owns like 6 igloos and he leases a bunch of others.
Yeah.
He stores like powder. So he owns a powder company, so he stores gunpowder and stuff in there.
Okay. But
I'm not sure about. I
After
don't know.
they shut down, all right, I'll figure it out. Because it's like a fact that I read, but then a lot of people have told me it's not true. I heard
I don't know if it's true. Or not.
In Keel's book, he mentions the Trojan Powder Company, and they released some, or they actually rented some igloos. They actually they weren't the ones that did the leasing, but they rented some igloos to store their stuff in, like crates of explosives and stuff.
Yeah, I know they store explosives. I'm not sure about dangerous chemicals. Although at the time of World War II, the chemicals they used to make TNT with, they may have stored some of them in there.
Okay, maybe that's what it is then.
Yeah.
All right, that's something. Okay, we're speeding again. All right, good. All right, so my first question for you guys is about the TNT plant. Can you tell me about the igloos? What was stored in them, and you can tell me about, you can tell me while the power plant was up and running, and then afterwards, just in general, from the time they were built and things like that, what type of things were stored in the igloos out of the TNT?
All right. The government stored high explosives in the igloos out in the TNT area, and what it was there was a manufacturing plant there, the North Power Plant, and they wait a minute. I'm trying to rephrase that.
Want me to take it?
Go ahead. Yeah, take it.
Okay.
If you start to go into something like that and then you lose your thought, you can pick it back up from where you left off. You don't have to start all the way over again, too. Just like
Okay, I'll pick it up. High explosives were manufactured in the North Power Plant, and they were stored in igloos. And there's also several acid plants throughout the TNT area, which made the acid for the bombs that the government used to make the stuff during the World War II.
And what I might do too for you guys too is ask you I might ask you both the same thing. That way,
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay.
Different opinions.
All right.
So let me ask you the same thing. What from the research you've done, what type of things were stored out in the TNT igloos?
Okay. As far as I know, the igloos were used to store TNT, but they were probably also used to store the chemicals that they used to manufacture the TNT with. And from what I understand, the chemicals were highly toxic, and some of the areas was contaminated. And apparently, at some point, they had a cleanup crew in the TNT area and cleaned a lot of it up. But I hear that 18 inches under the soil in some places is a dangerous level of toxins. And as long as you don't dig it out there, you're okay. But if you start digging around out there, you could be, putting yourself in danger.
I want to talk to you guys about the area known as like the McClintic Wildlife Preserve. Can you tell me about how it was in the 1980s and the early 90s? There were like environmental investigations that went on there that they found chemical spills and hazardous wastes in the ground and water. I think that's when they discovered it, I think, which was like the 80s and 90s. Can you just tell me about what happened there that, like in the 1980s and 90s in the TNT plant area, which is now closed, it had been found that chemicals had been leaking?
Okay. About the chemicals in the TNT area, all I know is that at some point the Environmental Protection Agency went in and because they found dangerous levels of these chemicals in the waters and stuff, and they cleaned it up. I'm sure they didn't get 100% of it. I'm not sure exactly what year that was, and how long it took them or anything like that.
And Tim, can I ask you the same thing? So, it seemed as if, later on it was discovered that chemicals and the things that were stored in the igloos, it had been found that they were kind of leaking in the ponds and the grounds and stuff. Can you just tell me about that?
Okay. I know that the government, they performed tests in the area because of high levels of radioactivity, and they wanted to do soil samples and make sure that it was environmentally safe and that the area couldn't be condemned because of the high levels of radioactivity.
I don't think there's any radioactivity. There's probably rumors, but I don't think they were dealing with radiation out there. It was just all chemicals.
Well, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, a lot of these things too, I forgot, I should have told you too. A lot of these things are kind of like, we're talking about myths and the legend, and part of this stuff is part of the rumor, part of the legend stuff. So some of the questions I'm going to ask you might not even be your personal opinion, but just to kind of like progress the story along, where it's just like, even if, you know what I'm saying? Where it's
I
might
see what you're saying.
use all of it for your personal opinion, but I might use some of it just so people who are seeing this for the first time, they're learning the story of.
Yeah, but you also don't want to put in stuff that you absolutely know isn't true.
Yeah, of course, yeah, totally. That's what I mean. So like sometimes, like if I ask you a question, just letting you know, it might be just to tell.
There may have been radioactivity. I don't think there was, because I don't think they were doing anything with any kind of uranium or plutonium out there. So I don't know why there would be.
Well, I've heard stories about there might be like the radioactivity in the ponds.
Right. Can you tell me the TNT plants that today, they're still pretty creepy. You guys, I know, have been up there quite a bit, like in modern times now. Is it still creepy out there? Like after all this time, is there still like a strange kind of energy that's going on there? Like you've kind of been up there, investigated it, so I think you kind of would know best. You've been there in like late hours. Have you ever seen anything strange up there these days? And tell me about the vibe that's there now.
Actually, our very first night in Point Pleasant, we went to the TNT area, and it was our very first night in town. And we were looking around. We had heard about the igloos, and we were looking around, and we actually found an igloo, and it was right around midnight. And I was with my brother John and our friend Dan, and they had their backs to the igloo, and I was looking towards the igloo, and all of a sudden I see this thing shooting across the sky, and what it was a meteor in the Earth's atmosphere, and I could see that it had a white head with flames shooting out the back. And I said, "Wow, what's that?" And I watched this thing for like maybe 5 or 6 seconds, and then by the time John and Dan got turned around, they'd only seen it for like 2 seconds, but they actually saw the flames shooting out the back. And it was kind of interesting, and it was traveling parallel with the Ohio River. And we've heard that UFOs sometimes travel parallel to the river.
Can you tell me too? You've been up there quite a bit. Is it still scary?
Yeah, it depends. At night, it's very atmospheric usually, especially when there's like fog in the area, which there is quite a bit because of the ponds and stuff. It does have a really eerie feel, and I've talked to a lot of different people that I've taken up there, and they all agree that there's like a eerie atmosphere to the place. Whether it's people's imagination or there's really something, going on there on a mystic level. It's hard to say, but I think there is something.
I yell at people who leave their cell phones on during my shoot.
So can you tell me the same thing you just did?
Okay.
Can you start it with something like, the TNT plants today are, still maybe creepy, and tell me about bringing things in.
Okay. In regards to the TNT area, it's still a very eerie place today, and a lot of people are brought up there, get the vibe feeling that, there's something, just a creepy feel there. And, it can be particularly bad when it's foggy. It has that definite, eerie feeling to it.
Oh, thanks. I'm going to move on to the cornstalk. Can you guys just tell me a little bit about, in general, like as if I've never heard the story, as if you're kind of telling me for the first time, what's the legend of the curse of Chief Cornstalk?
What had happened was Chief Cornstalk was, and some of his braves were held captive by the white man. And at one point, Chief Cornstalk was actually helping on the side of the white man. And I think there was some kind of uprising, and Chief Cornstalk and his son were murdered. And I think Chief Cornstalk, with his dying words, pronounced a curse on the area.
Okay.
Getting some audio interference.
Last question again? Sorry. Sure. So I'm going to ask you a last question because we can get it on the camera.
Okay.
Okay. Can you tell me about the curse of Chief Cornstalk? What is the legend and where did it come from?
Okay. In regards to Chief Cornstalk, back about 200 years ago, he was being held captive by a white man, and I guess they planned to put him to death. And before they killed him, he put a curse on the area that would, I guess, last 200 years. And the curse, the 200 years was up around the time the Silver Bridge fell, or towards the end of the 20th century. And some people think that the bridge falling has to do with Chief Cornstalk's curse. And I don't know what kind of documentation that there is that there really was a curse, but it's a very interesting legend.
Cool. And let me ask you, I was saying you both come to Point Pleasant quite a bit. You've been here and you kind of know a lot of the people. Do many of the townspeople believe in the Cornstalk curse, and what type of things are blamed on Cornstalk? And when I ask you what type of things are blamed on, don't go into like the Silver Bridge, but just kind of general, like fires are blamed on them, disasters, tragedies, deaths, poor economy, things like that, general things. So tell me, what do townspeople believe in the curse of Cornstalk, and what type of general things are blamed on the Cornstalk curse?
Hold on a second, I still got audio. I got audio.
The ghost.
Right. Hold on a second.
Master? Yeah. Do you ever have audio interference with your Sennheiser?
Never noticed it before.
Still doing it?
Well, closing now, it's just static.
Okay. Better now?
It's gone.
All right. Are we rolling?
Yeah.
All right. So we were up to the question of
That's back. I got to change the frequency, which I don't know how to do.
Okay. I was asking you about the townspeople. Do the townspeople believe in the curse from most people you talk to, and then what type of things in general terms are blamed on Cornstalk?
Okay, about the Cornstalk curse, in 1977, or in that general area, the courthouse got blown up. One of the prisoners there went in with dynamite or something and killed himself and his girlfriend, and some policemen there were seriously hurt and killed too. And that's one of the things that some people attribute to the Cornstalk curse. Personally, I don't think I've met anybody that really believed that there's a curse, but I have talked to a couple people that seem to think that the area was cursed, but most people seem to disregard that I've spoken to.
Can you list for me some of the things that are always blamed on Cornstalk, whether it's like fires and floods and the town not really doing
Well, actually, back in the 40s and 50s, when the TNT plant was operational, Point Pleasant was a flourishing town, and ever since the war ended, it seems like the town's pretty much dried up, and it's pretty much a dead town. And there was the incident about the jail blowing up, which I think was in 1976. And with that incident, someone had brought some dynamite into the jail and actually blew up the jailhouse.
And can you if I ask you, part of the myth and the legend, is that Cornstalk kind of gets blamed for anything and everything that goes bad in this town. I don't know if you guys have come across that, but that's not, I don't know if that's the reality of it, but just, part of the legend is that if someone, loses their wallet, it's Cornstalk's fault. It's like everything gets blamed on him. So can you just give me, in regards to the legend, can you just list off some things that are always blamed on him? Like I said, like floods, fires, tragedies, death. Can you just tell me that, part of the legend is, any those type of general bad things that happen here always seem to be blamed on Cornstalk.
Okay. In regards to the Cornstalk curse, there's some people in the area that attribute things like floods and fires and anything that goes wrong to Chief Cornstalk. Whether it's really Cornstalk's curse or not, it causes all the little things that go wrong. It's up for speculation.
All right, so I'm going to ask some Mothman questions now. Can you tell me, as if I've never heard the story, you're kind of telling it to me for the first time, about the Partridge incident? What happened? It was November 13th, 1966. What supposedly happened there?
Merle Partridge.
Yeah, tell me that story about, the
Okay.
TV explodes, the dog goes crazy, he sees the lights, the dog goes missing. Tell me that story as if kind of.
Okay, that happened like the night before the first sighting.
Yeah, 2 nights, I think. I'm not sure. It's November 13th, 1966. That's when it was.
How was it?
The 13th.
Is that 2 nights before?
Yes, it is.
So that would be 2 nights.
Okay.
66.
All right.
So just tell me that story as if, like, I've never heard it, and you're telling me.
His name's, I get confused. His name's Merle. I don't want to get it
So
wrong.
if you use his name, say Merle, because I'm correcting that in the video.
Yeah, okay. All right. On November 13th, 1966, Merle Partridge had a strange encounter at his farm. First thing that happened was there was like weird static on his TV, and eventually his TV exploded, and his dog was outside barking at something, and he went out, and for a long time there was rumors that he saw red eyes, but lately he's come forward and said what he saw was like red things rotating in his yard, and the dog ran out towards it and was barking, and all of a sudden the dog stopped barking, and he never saw his dog again. And then 2 nights later, Dennis Scarberry and the other kids saw a dead dog laying on the side of the road. And some people think it might be the same dog.
Right. I'm going to ask you the same question. Can you just tell me about the story of Merle Partridge? What happened?
All right. On November 13th, 1966, at Merle Partridge's farm, he was having problems with his television, and there was like static, and then the television eventually exploded, and he had noticed that his dog was barking at something outside, and he went out to take a look. And I had heard or read that he was barking at some eyes, some red eyes, but Merle Partridge has come forward since then and said that what he had seen was like swirling red lights, and the dog had ran towards the lights, and that's the last Merle ever saw of his dog. His dog's name was Bandit. And 2 nights later, on the outskirts of Point Pleasant, Linda Scarberry and her other friends, after they had fled the TNT area, Chuck's backing up. I'll pick it up after it stops.
Okay, yeah, okay. You can just pick it up.
Okay. All right.
2 nights later.
All right. 2 nights later, Linda Scarberry and her friends, after fleeing the TNT area, saw a large German Shepherd on the side of the road on the outskirts of Point Pleasant. And after they got the police to go back to the North Para plant where they had seen Mothman, the dead dog was gone.
Then let me ask you first. Just give me like a laundry list, just a list of physical characteristics of what the Mothman supposedly looks like. Just list off the things that people report when they see Mothman.
Okay. General characteristics of the Mothman are the large red or orange eyes, a 10-foot wingspan, and it's usually reported without not having a head, but it's like the eyes are inset into the shoulders. And I would say the build of the Mothman is like very muscular, and also very tall, like 7 foot, and of course with the 10-foot wingspread.
And
Let me get to him first.
Yeah. Can you do the same thing for me? Just list off what, the characteristics of Mothman.
Okay. Some of the characteristics of Mothman are that the main one is he has big red glowing eyes. He's been often described having bat wings, but there's different reports that say he has feathered wings also. They say his skin is grayish. Some say with short grayish feathers, but some have described him as having black, shiny looking skin. So the reports vary, possibly due to the fact that they're seeing him in low light. So their imagination could fill in a lot of gaps what they're actually seeing. But everybody that's seen what they call Mothman would say that he has two legs like a human and not a bird. Although there are cases where people have seen giant birds too. But typically when it's Mothman, it's, a humanoid creature.
And has anyone ever, have you guys found, has anyone ever described any sounds from the Mothman? Like has anyone ever described the sound that it makes? You can remember?
Linda Scarberry, or one of the witnesses, said that Mothman made a sound similar to like a large squeaking mouse.
Okay. Can you tell me that again, just so I have the camera on you?
All right.
Linda Scarberry said?
All right. Linda Scarberry once described, okay, wait a minute. I'm trying to think if it was Linda Scarberry or another witness.
Say one of the witnesses.
Okay, yeah, of course. Okay, one of the witnesses once described that Mothman made a sound similar to a large squeaking mouse.
Cool. Okay, so same as you did before when you told me the partridge story. Pretend as if I've never heard the story ever before, and you're telling me for the first time. And can we go wide on this one? Tell me the story of November 15th, 1966, the Scarberry and Mallet story. Tell me exactly what happened from start to finish. What happened out the first big Mothman sighting? Can you tell me that story?
Okay. Linda Scarberry was driving around with her fiance. Oh, no, wait a minute. Let me get the facts straight.
Scarberry Mallets.
Okay, the Scarberries and Mallets were riding around the TNT area. It was I guess they were, I'm not sure. Wait a minute. I don't want to elaborate.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, just take a minute and think of it.
Okay.
Why don't you let me do it?
Okay, you can take it.
Well, you do it first, and then maybe that'll kind of...
Okay. All right. Okay. On the night of November 15th, 1966, the Scarberry Mallets, including Linda Scarberry, who's now the most famous witness, were driving around the TNT area, and they were near the North Power Plant when they spotted a large creature walking along, and they started watching it, and they realized it was something that they had never seen before. It had glowing red eyes and stuff, so they decided to get out of there, and the creature started chasing them. And it followed them most of the way into town, and they could hear it like over top of their cars. They were driving along, and they were terrified, and they drove back into town and went to
the
sheriff's office.
They went to the sheriff's.
Sheriff's
They also
office.
stopped at Tiny's, though, didn't they?
Yeah.
I'm not going to cover that if they did, so you don't have to go there.
Yeah.
I'm only going to cover that they went back to the sheriff's office, and then he escorted them back
Okay.
there. Can you pick it up from where you left it off and tell me, they went back to the sheriff's office, and if you can include about how the police officer believed their story because they seemed genuinely scared, and then he eventually went back to the plant with them. They didn't see anything, but they did hear that weird noise over the radio.
Okay. So the Scarberry Mallets drove back into town and went to the police station, and they were genuinely terrified. So the police officer tended to believe that they're telling the truth, and he followed them back up to TNT, and they didn't find anything up there, including the dog they had seen on the side of the road was no longer there. And apparently the police officer got some sort of weird static on his radio.
Can you tell me about that?
All right.
Tell me about when the police officer escorted them back to the TNT plant. They didn't see anything, but they did hear something over the police officer's radio that was very strange.
Okay. On the way back to the TNT area, the police officers, one of the policemen heard some weird static on his radio, and he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And it was just one of the paranormal things that was happening at the time.
Good. And this is something that I want to focus on, just this part of the story that you just told me. The fact that the 4 young teenagers, November 15th, just 2 days after Merle Partridge's dog goes missing, on their way back as they're being chased by the Mothman, they see a dead dog on the side of the road that looks like Merle's dog. Can you tell me about just that specific part, and tell me why that's important? And it's important, I think, because a lot of people situate those two stories together now, because it's almost like it puts the couples in together, where it's like, Merle sees red glowing things in his yard and his dog goes missing, and then 2 days later, something with red eyes chases 4 people out of the TNT plant and they see a dead dog. So can you tell me about that?
On the way, when the Scarberry and Millettes were on the way back into town on Route 62, they saw a large dead dog laying alongside the road. And when they went back later with the police officer, the dog was gone. The relevance of this is that there was red lights seen when Merle Partridge's dog had disappeared 2 nights earlier. And
I can use that. I can use it, and we can just add something to it, and I can couple it together.
Okay.
You had said, the significance is if there were red lights seen in Merle Partridge's yard, and you would say, and if you pick it up with, much like the red eyes that the Mallets and Scarberries described, the Mothman chases them, 2 nights later, and they see a dog that's dead, just like, something like that.
So there was red lights. Okay. When Merle Partridge's dog went missing, he saw red lights, and then 2 nights later, the kids at the TNT area saw the red lights with Mothman's eyes. There seems to be a heavy tie-in there. And also, the dog was dropped near some Indian mounds that are no longer there, which could be a part of the mystery too, because UFOs are often seen near Indian mounds along the Ohio River.
Let me ask you, Tim, about the dog. Can you just tell me just that specific part of the story? As the Scarberries and Mallets are fleeing from the Mothman, chasing their car, they see a large dead dog on the side of the road. And what's interesting about that is it fits the description of the missing dog.
All right. After Linda Scarberry and her friends had fled the TNT area, they had reached the outskirts of Point Pleasant, and there they saw a large German Shepherd lying on the side of the road. And they later learned that Merle Partridge's dog had went missing, and someone had speculated that it may have been the same dog. Also, where the dog was dropped, it was dropped within, I'd say, 20 yards of some small 4-foot Indian mounds. And there was also a circle of trees beyond a fence that ran alongside the road there. And this circle of trees was a natural spring. And I had heard that this spring was at the center of Chief Cornstalk's village 200 years ago.
Cool. I'm going to ask you the same question. Just pinpointing that certain part of the story. As the Scarberries and Mallets are fleeing from the Mothman, after it's sighted in the power plant, they pass a dead German Shepherd. And that's it's significant because it fits the description of Merle Partridge's missing dog. Can you just tell me about that?
Okay. On the way back into town, the Scarberry and Millettes saw a large dog dead on the side of the road, and it's very significant because it's very similar. It was a large dog that went missing 2 nights earlier when Merle Partridge's dog was barking at the lights in the field.
So there seems to be a lot of obvious connections between all these stories, even if they're not exactly 100% provable. It's just that there's a bunch of little kind of weird connections, kind of like, the one we were just talking about. Merle's dog goes missing, it's a German Shepherd, and then 2 days later, the people that are chased by Mothman see the German Shepherd. So there's kind of, even if they're not facts per se, there's a lot of coincidences that are kind of, I think, interesting, which makes this whole story interesting. Can you tell me about, to me, I think they're pretty obvious. There's a lot of connections and correlations between all of these stories. You don't have to get into the specifics of them, but for more examples to give you are there's the graveyard sighting in Clendenin, even before Merle's dog goes missing. And that's where the people are digging the grave, and they if you remember that story, the people are digging the grave, and they see a man fly through the trees. So that's kind of before Merle's thing, and then Merle's thing happens, and then the Scarberry thing happens, and then the TNT plant thing starts to happen. So without going into the specifics of all of those stories, can you just tell me them in a general way that that there seems that what's interesting about them is that they may not necessarily be facts, but there seems to be an awfully lot of strange coincidences that a flying man is seen in Clendenin, West Virginia, days before the Merle Partridge sighting. Then the Merle Partridge sighting happens. Then the Scarborough Millette sighting happens. And then at the end of it, just tie in, it seemed, there's a lot of odd coincidences that seem to be related to all these stories.
Okay. Starting in November of 1966, a lot of strange stuff started happening along the Ohio Valley. One of the first things that happened was a grave digger saw a man flying through the trees while digging a grave. And there's a rash of other events that happened, and they all seem to tie together in some way that we don't quite understand.
Can you tell me about that too?
Right.
That that the interesting thing I think about all of these stories of Mothman is that there seems to be an awful lot of unusual coincidences that tie the stories together.
All right. Do you know the exact date that the graveyard sighting took place?
I don't think that matters. It was in late November.
It was only days.
I think it was late November.
Days before Partridge's. What? I have it somewhere, but not
Okay, it's no big deal.
But it's
All right.
it's very close to.
All right. A few days before Merle Partridge's incident at his farm, some grave diggers were digging a grave, and one of them saw a figure of red eyes fly out of a tree. And then a few days later, the Merle Partridge incident happened. Then a few days after that, the Scarberries and Mallets incident happened, and some people think these are all tied together.
And not now, just talking in really, really general terms of like all of the things, UFOs, Mothman, Silver Bridge, without naming them. Can you just tell me that Point Pleasant has had a lot of unusual things happen forever, and an interesting aspect to it is that of all the weird stories, there always seems to be strange coincidences that tie them together. That's all I need, something like that.
Okay. West Virginia, the Point Pleasant area in particular, has had a long history of bizarre incidences taking place. And what's the?
And that's fine. You can just continue for that. And maybe we continue with one of the more interesting factors is that within all of these weird stories as a collective, there are strange coincidences that tie them all together.
Okay. And among all these stories, there's very bizarre coincidences that seem to tie them together.
This podcast is a companion piece to the original feature-length documentary film from 2011 of the same title. If you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to see the film that started it all by visiting www.eyesofthemothman.com.
Can you tell me, from what's understood, when the four kids go to the police station and report their story, do the police believe them? And if they do, can you tell me why they did?
Okay. When the kids arrived at the police station to report their Mothman sighting, the police seemed to believe them because they seemed to be truly terrified. And I guess the police didn't really think that the kids would be faking it and be that scared at the same time.
Let me ask you the same thing. Did the police believe the story when did the police believe Scarberries and Mallets when they told them their story?
Okay. When the Scarberries and Mallets arrived at this police station, they told the police their story, and they were generally frightened. And the police did believe their story, although there were rumors that the kids were probably out drinking or smoking out at the TNT area and probably hallucinated the whole thing. Although the police tend to think that the kids were sincere.
I'm going to ask you a similar question. And one thing that's interesting about the Scarberry and Mallet case is that for a long time, no one ever really seems to question their story. I guess they were pretty reliable people and they had a good reputation. Can you tell me that's one of the interesting things? There's these four kids and they have this kind of wild tale. But what's even more interesting is that no one really even doubts it for quite some time. Can you tell me about that?
I'm not sure exactly how to elaborate on that.
What I'm trying to do is, like I said, this is more along the lines of just telling the story. Just for someone who's watching this who's never seen it, one question that might go is like, well, didn't people, not believe them right off the bat? So to cover that, I'm trying to
Actually, a lot of people didn't believe them. It isn't like people tend to believe the story. It was like the opposite. People tend not to believe the story.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's probably a 50-50 thing. Some people believe, some people didn't believe.
When it happened, you mean? Like when it happened?
Yeah, I figured probably not. They probably believed something happened to them, but I don't think they believed there was anything really odd about it. They probably just thought they saw a big bird or whatever.
Can you tell me about the specifically like the eyes of the Mothman? A lot of people always talk about the eyes. Tell me about the eyes.
The eyes of the Mothman are reported to be like maybe 6 inches wide and either bright red or an orangish red. And they have a very hypnotic effect, whereas if you look at them, they almost hypnotize you and it's hard to take your eyes off of them.
The eyes of Mothman are big. Okay, sorry. The eyes of Mothman are big glowing red orbs, or some people have described them as like almond shaped, like almost like an alien eye. They're about 6 inches apart, and they also tend to be very hypnotic, so that when people see them, they're hard to look away, and they also tend to be so bright that they sort of mask the head, where some people think that Mothman didn't really have a head. His eyes were set high on his body.
Can you tell me, what was it like at the TNT plant after the Mothman was spotted? People went there looking for the Mothman. Hunters waited for it to try to catch it and kill it. There was a lot of media attention. Can you tell me, after the Mothman was spotted, what's it like up at the TNT plant now?
After Mothman was sighted by the Scarberries, a lot of people were going up there every night trying to see it themselves. And it became kind of like a circus where there's like hundreds of cars driving through the area, and it probably became a big hassle for the police to make sure people weren't out there shooting themselves and stuff. And generally, the people that were out there looking for it never saw it, but the people that weren't looking for it would be the ones that ended up seeing it.
Just got to change table.
Can you tell me a little bit about after Mothman spotted at the TNT plant? Specifically, tell me, there were actually people that went up there with like guns and hunters were looking for this thing to actually like shoot it and capture it. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
All right. After the Scarberries and Mallets had reported seeing the Mothman at the TNT area, almost every night there were like hundreds of cars lining the roads of the TNT area looking for Mothman. And there were also, around that time, there was a lot of UFOs seen, and a lot of people were out looking for UFOs as well as looking for Mothman. And so people were actually carrying guns out in the TNT area looking to shoot and kill Mothman. And it became a major headache for the local police to go out and patrol the grounds and make sure, no one was hurt.
When the Mothman was spotted, people started kind of talking again in town about the curse of Chief Cornstalk. Again, like soon after Mothman is spotted, it's like, a lot of rumors start popping up that maybe it's related to Cornstalk. Can you just tell me about that happening, that, soon after Mothman is spotted, there's rumors start floating around that maybe it's somehow tied back to Cornstalk?
You want me to take that? Or?
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. After Mothman was spotted and several people had seen him, the rumors started floating around that it could be somehow attached to the Chief Cornstalk curse. I should probably say that again. Okay. After Mothman was spotted, Okay. After Mothman was spotted, rumors started floating around that there could be some connection with the Chief Cornstalk curse.
Okay. After Mothman is spotted more often, there are professors at universities in the local area who tried to say that the sightings were just a sandhill crane, kind of a rare species of bird. For the people that witnessed Mothman right up close and firsthand, do you think that was an insult to them? That, they're claiming to see like a monster 10 feet away from them, and the professors are saying, "Oh, it's just a sandhill crane." How do you think they felt about it? I mean, it was kind of insulting.
Okay.
Do you agree?
Okay. After several people had seen Mothman, college professors from around the area were consulted to see what it could possibly be, and a couple different professors came to the conclusion that it was probably a sandhill crane, which is an insult to the people that saw Mothman, because it would be easy to
That's all right.
Okay.
You were saying, to the people that saw Mothman, that was an insult.
Okay. To the people that saw Mothman, that's an insult, because most people could be out. Sorry about that. Okay. To the people that saw Mothman, that's an insult that these professors would say it was a sandhill crane, because most people could tell the difference between a 5-foot bird and a 10-foot winged creature. And also, sandhill cranes supposedly have like a little bit of red above their eyes, but their eyes were on opposite sides of his head, and you wouldn't be able to get any kind of eye shine off of both their eyes at the same time if it was shining off the eyes or the red over the top of their eyes, the way you did with Mothman, where people saw both his eyes lit up at the same time. So his eyes were on the front of his head, not on the side of his head like a bird.
Tim, let me ask you the same thing. Do you think the people that saw Mothman, when they heard the professors were saying it's nothing but a sandhill crane, do you think they were insulted by that?
I'm trying to think how to phrase it. Okay, repeat the question.
Do you think the people that saw Mothman firsthand, they were describing this glowing-eyed monster, and then all of a sudden professors in the area say, "Oh, it's nothing but a bird, a sandhill crane." Do you think they were insulted by that? It clearly wasn't.
All right. After the Scarberries and Mallets had reported seeing the Mothman, several college professors were consulted as to what this creature might actually be. And they came to the conclusion that it was a sandhill crane. And the many witnesses, the Scarberries, Mallets, and a few others, when they had heard the conclusions that came to by these college professors, I think they were heavily insulted by it, because it isn't like they were treated like they were ignorant, like they didn't know the difference between like a 10-foot monster and a regular 4 or 5 foot bird.
You guys tell me a little bit about like life after a Mothman sighting. Some say that the after effects were worse than the actual sighting itself. Like, they had people afterwards and endured like trauma, and they had problems with their skin and their eyes and things like that. Can you tell me about that aspect of seeing Mothman, that people actually say it's worse, the after effects are worse than seeing the thing?
Okay. Some people that saw Mothman had a great deal of trauma inflicted on them. One witness had her eyes burned and from shoot.
That's a good way to start. That's a good start.
Okay.
And if what you can do is tell me, just start just like you did and go into that just like you did.
Okay.
And if you can wrap it up with, so most people actually explain that it's the after effects of seeing the creature, that's worse than seeing the actual event.
Okay. Okay. Several of the people that saw Mothman had a great deal of trauma to deal with afterwards. Like, one witness had their eyes burned, and it's called conjunctivitis when you get too much sun and it burns your eye, or other radiations can cause that. And there was also a lot of emotional stress on these people, because they were like totally freaked out that they saw it. Plus, they had to deal with ridicule of people making fun of them for seeing a monster. So the after effects of seeing Mothman in some cases was worse than actually seeing them.
And just like we've been doing, as if I've never heard the story before, can you guys tell me the story of Marcella Bennett? It was November 16th, 1966. That's the one where you remember that story?
Yeah.
Drops the baby. Can you tell me that story? As if you're telling me.
Okay. Well, first off, there's conflicting reports on that, and I don't quite understand how that came to be. One thing says she fell on her baby. She fell over on top of her baby. Another one says she dropped her baby. And I'm not sure what the actual because I've read both.
Yeah,
I'm not sure which way you wanted to take this.
Well, you can even say that. You can even say, without going into too much detail, you can say, when you're telling me the story, say, you know, when we get to the part of her car wakes up and the creature and she's so scared, you can say that, you know, it was reported that she either dropped her baby or fell with her baby. You can just state like that.
Okay, I'll try something like that. All right. On the night of November 16th, Marcella Bennett and who was she with?
I think she was visiting a friend.
She was visiting.
I think she was with herself and just her baby, right?
Yeah, they showed up with. She was with somebody. She was with.
It happened at the Ralph.
She was with Raymond Walmsley.
It happened at the Ralph Thomas house.
Right.
Is Raymond Walmsley her brother?
I'm not sure.
Raymond Walmsley was there.
Including who she was with.
Okay. Should I mention it was at the Ralph Thomas house?
Yeah, that's fine. You can do that.
Okay. On the night of November 16th, 1966, Marcella Bennett came to the house of Ralph Thomas because she wanted to visit Ralph and her.
Right.
On the night of November. Sorry about that. Okay. On the night of November. Get all choked up.
Maybe you should let me take it.
I'll take it. On the night of I can't say November right.
November.
On the night of November 16th, 1966, Marcella Bennett showed up at the house of Ralph Thomas because she was there to visit some friends. And after she got out of her car, she saw a huge figure rise up in the yard, and it scared her so badly that she either dropped her baby or possibly fell on top of her baby. There's conflicting reports there. And her friend that was with her helped her up, and they ran to the house, and they let him in the house. And apparently everybody in the house was panic-stricken because Mothman was right outside the house. And Mothman peered in through the front window.
And let me ask you the same thing. What happened that night?
All right. On the night of November 16th. Okay. On the night of November 16th, Marcella Bennett was visiting some friends on the outskirts of the TNT area, and I think it was the house of Ralph Thomas. And her and her friends arrived, and when she got out of the car, something large rose up off the ground, and it scared Marcella so badly she either dropped her baby or she fell on top of it. There's conflicting reports there. And within maybe 5 seconds or so, she got herself together and she grabbed up her infant, and her and her friends ran into the house. And then moments later, Mothman scurried onto the porch and peered in through the windows at them.
Can you tell me the last part of the story? Let's started with, after she gets her baby.
Okay.
Mothman actually, it's not over yet. I mean, maybe we'll say something like that. The story doesn't end there. The picture actually pursues her on the porch, is looking in the windows.
Okay. After grabbing up her baby and running to the house, the story doesn't end there. Mothman had actually scurried into the porch and was peering in the windows at the frightened people. And hysteria swept over them, and they called the police. And by the time the police got there, Mothman was gone.
So talking about the Marcella Bennett case, the woman, she's so terrified that she drops her infant child when she comes face to face with the Mothman. And this kind of incident happened for several minutes. It wasn't like seconds. It wasn't like, oh, look, there's a flying thing. Maybe it was the Mothman. This was like something that happened right in front of them. It was pretty clear what was going on. Can you just talk to me about the significance of that? Because, a lot of, it wasn't a Mothman story where someone sees a bird and maybe it's Mothman, maybe it's not. Can you talk to me about that? This Marcella Bennett case is significant because she sees it, 5 feet away from her, and it lasts a long period of time, and there are other witnesses there to verify the story.
We take it?
Go ahead.
Okay. The Marcella Bennett case is very significant because whatever she saw terrified her enough that she dropped her baby, and the baby was okay, but she could have hurt her baby inadvertently. And if it was like a man in a suit or something like that, chances of it scaring her that badly are very low. It would almost definitely have to be something truly terrifying to scare her like that. And he was within like 6 feet of this creature, so she got a really good look at it.
And let me ask you the same question. Can you tell me about how this case is important because the sighting is extremely close and it lasts a long time. It's minutes, not seconds, and there are other people to back up the story.
All right. The Marcella Bennett case is particularly interesting because, or should I say significant?
That's fine.
Okay. The Marcella Bennett case is particularly significant because whatever she saw scared her. Whatever she saw scared her enough that she would drop her baby. Whereas if it was just an animal or a man in a suit, I don't think it would scare her that badly that she would actually drop her baby and risk harm to her infant. So I think it's a significant Mothman sighting.
Right. Can you tell me that? Can you try to nail these three things for me? That either one of you guys that three things that are also important to this is that. If we start with Marcella Bennett case, is also important because she witnesses Mothman at extremely close distance. The sighting lasts several minutes, and it can be backed up by other witnesses.
Okay. Also significant about the Marcella Bennett case is the fact that how to repeat that.
All right, so that's good. It's just the 3 points are the closeness of the sighting, the length of it, and the witness. Any way you want to put it.
Okay. Also significant about the Marcella Bennett case is the fact that from the time she saw Mothman and ran in the house, the sighting lasted several minutes. And when she saw Mothman, she was in very close proximity to him. And there was like 5 or 6 witnesses in total. So it's a very important case.
Can you just tell me in general about the Mothman sightings? A lot of them actually did take place in close proximity to people. I talked to one person like last week who said she looked out the window and the thing was like literally right in her window. Can you just tell me about, in general, there are actually a lot of cases of the Mothman sighting near Point Pleasant that took place very close distances, that lasted very long, and just in general about how many of them there were. That it was happening all the time. Can you tell me about that?
Okay. Okay. In the first month or so, when Mothman first started being sighted, there were dozens of cases of people seeing them. A lot of these cases were close. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. In the first month or so of Mothman sightings, there was dozens of sightings, many of which weren't reported, and a lot of these sightings were close-range encounters where people could see that this was a monster, not a bird. And
that's good. And just wrap up with, and they were happening all the time, something like that. They were happening.
There was over like 100 sightings.
Okay. Should I go through the whole thing again?
You can if you want.
Okay.
You can just wrap it up with the amount of sightings there were. Either way you want to do it.
Okay. It's hard to keep it.
I always say, and there was over 100 sightings.
Okay. And in addition to this, there was over 100 sightings reported, but possibly another 100 or so that weren't reported.
So even though we discovered it, Tim, let me ask you, so when all of this is said and done, when, long after Mothman is gone out of the area, how many sightings are we talking about in total? How many sightings, just approximately?
Well, let's say.
Doesn't have to be like an exact, I'm just, it's
okay.
Hundreds of thousands.
Okay. During the late 60s, during the Mothman flap, when all the UFOs were seen and several large birds were also reported, there was probably in excess of like 100 Mothman sightings, and there was probably just as many, if not more, sightings that went unreported.
Great. You guys know, I know you do like a lot of other, you're interested in other things besides Mothman, like other kind of cryptozoology and monsters and things like that. And Mothman is not the only, but Point Pleasant is not the only place that something like wings has been seen. There's been stuff like in New Jersey and in Texas, like there's like a Jersey Devil, things like that that also have similar characteristics to the Mothman. Can you just tell me about, for people that don't know, if this wasn't like a one-time thing, that there's actually been other sightings of weird animals with wings and stuff.
Okay, I'll take it. Okay. Over the years, there's been other sightings of winged creatures all around the world. One case in particular is the Jersey Devil, which has been seen on and off in New Jersey for the last couple hundred years. Another case is something called the Thunderbird, which is a very large bird that has been seen in Illinois and has been seen a lot in north central Pennsylvania.
Do you want to add anything to that too, about these about other places?
No, that would cover everything pretty much that I'd say.
Okay. Can you tell me about the people who were reporting Mothman and UFOs? That they were kind of all walks of life of people. They were policemen, they were public officials, church-going people, well-respected people in the community. Just tell me about, the sightings of Mothman kind of came from all walks of life of people.
Okay.
Can you tell me about that?
All
right. Just for your sake.
Okay. All right. When the Mothman sightings were reported, it came in from very many people, regular civilians, police, even policemen saw them. So these sightings took place. Sorry.
Just start again and just tell me, list for me like some of the type of people that spot them off.
Okay. When the Mothman sightings first started coming in, they were first reported by civilians, and later on, policemen were reporting them. So when these sightings came in, they were being reported from people from all walks of life.
Great. So talking about kind of like your own personal research that you guys have done on Mothman, you have come across a great deal of evidence that supports that some of these things are connected. Can you tell me about some of your findings, specifically like the cornstalk curse and the dead partridge dog and the Scarberry sighting, the Indian burial mound, and those things? Can you tell me about your own personal research you've done and some of the things that you guys have discovered? Can you do something? And this one too, if like one of you wants to start talking to me, and then when you're done, if there are things that you left out that you want to add, just pick it up right after.
Do you want me to cover this or what?
Go ahead.
And you can kind of both do it together, but just don't talk over each other. That's it.
Yeah.
If there's something he forgets when he's done,
I have an idea. I'll start, and then John could finish up.
Perfect.
Okay.
So tell me about some of your own research that you've done. What have you guys found?
Okay. During our research, we found some interesting discoveries. Like, for example, the Silver Bridge collapsed on December 15th, 1967. And during our research, we discovered that there was a bridge further up the Ohio River called the Elk River Bridge, and it collapsed on December 15th, 1904. So it happened on the exact same date as the collapse of the Silver Bridge, but something like 63 years prior.
One of the strange things about the Mothman story is the fact that Mothman dropped the dog near a grove of trees, which was the center of Cornstalk's village. Also, there was some Adena Indian mounds, which are thousands of years older than Chief Cornstalk, that were nearby. And one of my theories is that the Indian mounds that were all up and down the Ohio River are somehow connected with UFOs because they're seen in close proximity to Indian mounds. And there's 100 igloos in the TNT area, which are concrete bunkers covered over with dirt and grass and trees. And their basic look is they look like Indian mounds. So there might be some sort of tie-in why all this paranormal energy is centered in Point Pleasant, because nearby is a TNT area with all these igloos that look like Adena Indian mounds.
And if you could start, in our research, one thing that we found was, and tell me about how you guys discovered that the placement of where Bandit was being dead on Route 62 is next to, the relation to Cornstalk's history.
Okay.
But you can start with, one interesting thing we've discovered in our own research is that where, Bandit was found dead on Route 62.
Okay.
Something about Cornstalk there.
One of the things we discovered in our research was the fact that okay, let me start that over again.
John, it's not the ring of trees. The ring of trees may not have been there 200 years ago, but the spring was. But you said the ring of trees before, so it's just spring.
Whatever.
Okay,
It's something that's minor. Okay.
Yeah, well, something
If you want to tell me that, it was that one interesting thing in our research that we discovered was that where Bandit was found dead on Route 62 was an area that Cornstalk had camped with inhabited, and you don't want to go into to the trees if you want.
Okay. So what was the first sentence to say?
One interesting thing that we found in our own research.
Okay. One interesting thing we found in our own research was the fact where the dead dog Bandit was found was right close to where.
Right.
Okay, let's start over. One of the interesting things we found in our research was the fact that the dead dog Bandit was found nearby a grove of trees, which is a spring where it used to be the center of Chief Cornstalk's village.
Cool. Can I ask you the same question? Tell me about that discovery that you found about where Bandit was found dead. It was actually where Cornstalk camp was, so maybe there is something to that.
Okay, should I start it off again?
You can start the same way. Something that came up in our research.
Okay. Something interesting that we discovered during our research is that the area of road along Route 62 where the dead German Shepherd Bandit was found is near a spring, which was like 200 years ago, was at the center of Chief Cornstalk's village. So that in itself is very interesting and relates to the Chief Cornstalk curse.
Do you guys think, in your own opinion, if the incidents here in Point Pleasant were just the Mothman, like not UFOs, not the bridge falling, nothing else, would people be more accepting of like an explanation of Mothman as being something like earthbound, like a pterodactyl or a sandhill crane? Or do you think that because Mothman was kind of coupled in with all these other paranormal things that it automatically got situated with that? There were no UFOs witnessed or the bridge falling or the curse. Do you think people would have been more accepting of the Mothman with maybe some type of bird as opposed to something alien? Or what I'm trying to get at is that because of all the weird stuff, people automatically associated Mothman with the UFOs and things. So maybe that's a better way to put it, where, because Mothman was happening at the same time as UFOs and paranormal activity, a lot of people thought it had something to do with it.
Okay. This is hard to formulate. Due to the fact that there was a lot of UFO sightings in the area at the time, many people associate Mothman with the paranormal and UFOs as opposed to it possibly being a big bird or a pterodactyl or something like that.
Due to the fact that the Mothman sightings took place in conjunction with other weird events, say like Men in Black encounters, sightings of UFOs, bizarre incidents happening with like radios and televisions, I think people lumped it all together as in something very paranormal was going on outside.
And talking about that, like, what's your opinion? I think people associate Mothman with something paranormal because that seems to be what makes the most sense. Like, when you look at the facts and the evidence, do you guys agree that the evidence kind of supports that Mothman was something paranormal in origin, not like a bird, not something earthbound?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that? Like, when you look at all the evidence of Mothman, does it actually support something paranormal as opposed to something not?
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay.
Okay. When you look at all the evidence regarding Mothman and UFOs and all the strange things that happened in the Ohio Valley, it seems to support that something paranormal was going on. When looking at all the evidence in regards to Mothman and the UFOs, it tends to make one think that it's definitely paranormal and not something that can be explained by science or a big bird or something like that.
For more information about our program, or to find out where you can watch the original documentary film or purchase a limited edition signed DVD copy, please visit www.eyesofthemothman.com.
One of the setbacks of Mothman research is a lot of people are still asking the question, did it happen? When the question should be, what happened?
Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about UFOs. Many of the UFO cases and sightings that occurred here kind of break the mold of a typical sighting. People were not just seeing lights in the sky, but they were actually coming in direct contact with solid working craft, even in broad daylight. Can you tell me about some of these sightings that kind of break the mold of the stereotypical sightings? Tell me about some of the daylight ones and some of the ones where people are actually going up and touching things and looking at things in craft.
I'm not really familiar with
Well,
that.
there's Woody Dare.
Oh, well, I wasn't around here though.
It was like 40 or 50 miles from here.
I didn't want to go into Woody yet. If you're not familiar with it, we can skip it. But there were some UFO sightings where people reported seeing UFOs during the day and even walked up to them, looked at them, touched them.
Yeah, I don't know much about that.
We know about people seeing the UFOs, but we don't know of any reports of people coming in direct contact with them, though.
Okay. The one. Okay. Well, tell me what you know about the UFOs and about people seeing. Tell me about that. What you guys do know about the UFO sightings that were going on here.
Okay. Back at the time of Mothman, hundreds or thousands of people up and down Ohio Valley were seeing UFOs, both lights in the sky and, in some cases, they would see actual craft. They weren't of earthly nature.
Back around the time of the Mothman sightings, hundreds of people were reporting sightings of UFOs, both at nighttime encounters and daylight encounters.
And do you guys remember where were most of the UFO sightings happening? And when I looked at it, there was a lot of things happening over the power plants and over the river. Can you tell me about that? That's where they were most frequently spotted, over the river and over the TNT plants?
All right. Most of the sightings that occurred...
You say UFOs.
Okay, sorry.
Cool.
All right. Most of the UFO sightings that occurred in Point Pleasant in the late 60s took place over the north and south power plants in the TNT area and along the Ohio River.
Do you remember what's called I think it's Charles Hearn, the Hearn sighting that happened at the Ohio River? There was a man who witnessed like a UFO and its occupants. It was kind of, I think he was walking his dog early morning one day on the Ohio River, and he came across a UFO and like its occupants, like people from the UFO, were doing some work in the waters and things like that. Do you remember that story at all?
I probably read something like that, but I didn't know. I haven't heard anything in conjunction with Point Pleasant area like that. But I've read of a lot of different cases like that.
Yeah, there was one. It was. I think it was in Keel's book is where I got it. But there was a guy who was walking his dog on the Ohio side of the river, sees a UFO, sees people working in the water and things like that.
I remember something like that. I've forgotten a lot of stuff I've read in Keel's book. Okay. I can't remember too much about that incident.
Okay, that's cool. That's good. I just want to ask you about Mary Hyre. And I know, obviously, that you guys, she's not like before your time and everything like that, but just to tell the story of who she was. So Mary Hyre had become a shoulder to lean on for people in Point Pleasant who were seeing these weird things. Can you talk about Mary Hyre's role and how she played a key kind of role in this story?
Okay.
All right, I'll take it. Mary Hyre was a reporter for the Athens Messenger, and she reported about all the weird stuff that was happening in Point Pleasant, like the Mothman sightings and the UFO sightings. And she even had a Man in Black encounter herself. This happened when, I think it was after the collapse of the Silver Bridge, and it was like in late December. And a small man, probably around 4 feet 6 inches, came into her office and wanted to see reports on UFOs. And his behavior was rattling her nerves. And she called in her assistant, and she was talking to her assistant, and all of a sudden, the little man picked up a pen, laughed hysterically, and then ran out of the office.
Can you tell me about Mary? How was she looked at by the people in the community? People who were seeing these weird things came to her and trusted her.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Mary Hire was like a noted authority on all this bizarre stuff that was happening because she was reporting on it.
Okay, all right.
Okay, yeah. Tell me a little bit about this. How people were seeing weird stuff that was embarrassing, but they trusted her to tell her.
Yeah. Okay. Mary Hire. Okay. Mary Hire is important in the Mothman case because she was willing to report on UFOs and Mothman more than the average reporter. And she built up trust in the community, so people would actually trust her to not laugh at them when they told her their stories. Mary Hire was very well respected in the Point Pleasant community, and people in the area weren't afraid to come to her and tell her her bizarre.
Tell her their bizarre stories.
Okay. Mary Hire was very well respected in the Point Pleasant community, and people weren't afraid to come to her and tell her their bizarre stories.
So, like I told you guys, your interview is pretty long, so I have more questions for you. But I'm starving. Do you want to order lunch or something? You guys hungry?
Yeah, we could do that. I need a break anyway.
You want to do lunch?
I'm starting.
Want to take like a little break or something?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
I'm going to.
Camera speaking. All right. So my next question for you guys, we're talking about Mary Hire. Aside from the Mothman sightings and UFOs, people also reported a great deal of hearing like odd noises and beeps and electronic disturbances. People in the community were having a lot of that going on. Can you tell me about that? Can you tell me, like, aside from Mothman and UFOs, tell me about some of the reports that were coming into Mary about electronic problems and beeps and noises?
Oh, are you talking like a lot of people were having phone problems?
Things like that. Hearing noises and electronic disturbances, phones ringing with nothing, static, all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
If you could just start with, aside from Mothman and UFOs, Mary Hire was also getting a lot of reports of, and then tell me about the beeps and stuff.
Okay. All right. Okay. Besides the fact that Mary Hire was getting reports of Mothman, she was also getting reports of strange activity like weird beeps on phones and static on radios and TVs and weird stuff like that.
And there was a lot of, it seemed like there was a lot of problems with like electricity and things that were electronic. And can you tell me about some of those?
All right.
What were people reporting?
Okay. Along with the reports of Mothman and UFOs, Mary Hire was getting reports of like static electricity on radios, faulty televisions, and a lot of weird blips and clicks and wheezes on telephones.
Can you guys just tell me a little bit? Tell me again how Mary, she was trusted by everybody in the community. They could go to her and tell her the wildest stories and know that she would give them respect. Can you just tell me about how people looked at her as somebody they can go to trust with these strange stories? How did people in the community experiencing these weird things, how did they view Mary?
All right. Mary Hire was a well-respected person in the community where the person could go to and tell their stories to, and she wouldn't scoff or laugh at them, and she took their reports very seriously.
You touched on this before, and I want to focus on this story. Can you tell me about the time Mary had been working at the courthouse here in Point Pleasant, and there was kind of like a small, unusual man that walked into her office during the late hours of the courthouse. Can you just tell me what happened with the pen and kind of the laughter and all that stuff? What happened?
Okay. Sometime after a few weeks after the collapse of the Silver Bridge in late December of 1967, a short man in black, well, wait a minute, okay. A short Oriental-looking man came into Mary Hire's office, and I think he wanted to. Wait a minute. Can
you actually start with one night in the courthouse? Because I'm not sure. I might tell this story before I tell the fall of the bridge.
Okay.
So that way, if I do that.
All right.
You know what I mean?
Okay. One night while Mary Hire was working at the courthouse in Point Pleasant, a small Oriental-looking man came in, and he questioned Mary about UFO reports, and then he he made Mary feel very uncomfortable, and Mary called in her assistant, and together they questioned the man, and the man suddenly grabbed the pen off the desk, laughed hysterically, then ran out.
Looking back at that story, that's kind of an example of, you know, a lot of people have been reporting strange people in the town that didn't seem to fit in. And can you tell me just somehow, somewhere along the lines of, you know, the story of the small man that had scared Mary Hire at the courthouse is just an example of, you know, some of the strange men that were seen in town.
Okay. This incident that occurred with the small Oriental-looking man in the courthouse with Mary Hire is just an example of the very weird, bizarre men that were seen throughout Point Pleasant around the time of the Mothman sightings.
Can you guys tell me, this town is very small and kind of everybody knows everybody. So people that are kind of, that don't belong stick out. So can you tell me about that? Like when people were starting to report strange people around town, they were doing it because it's a town where everyone knows one another. So kind of outsiders stand out pretty obviously. Can you tell me about that? That's one of the ways that people, you know, knew that there were outsiders in town because everyone knows everybody.
At the time of Mothman, there was a lot of strange men showing up in Point Pleasant, and they really stuck out. For one thing, they were usually in like three-piece suits, all in black, and Point Pleasant's a very small town. And everybody knew everyone. So when these strangers showed up, you know, it got people talking.
Okay, now I want to talk to you guys about a little bit about the Men in Black. People in Point Pleasant were not only witnessing these strange things up in the sky, but just right in front of their faces too. There were many witnesses that claimed to have face-to-face intrusions with what people call Men in Black. Can you just touch on some of these incidents? What were happening to people? They were being approached by government officials, if you want to call that, or just tell me about it.
All right.
It was after Mothman sightings, after UFO sightings. Tell me about what were people.
Usually after someone would report a Mothman sighting or a sighting of a strange object in the sky, they would usually be harassed by these beings called the Men in Black. And they wouldn't necessarily always be wearing black. Sometimes they would be dressed as, say, someone working for the government. But they would show up and they'd harass and intimidate the witness and tell them not to. They generally tell them if he knew what was good for him, they wouldn't talk about what they had seen.
Some of the Men in Black cases, some of the Men in Black cases at time of Mothman. Okay, sorry about that. The brain's going dead. Some of the Men in Black cases at the time of Mothman involved the men actually trying to force some of the witnesses into their cars. So it got pretty scary for some of the people encountering these beings.
And can you just point out to me that, you know, like 9 times out of 10, people that were running into the Men in Black were people that had witnessed Mothman or witnessed the UFOs, that there was like a connection there. Those who saw Mothman, those who saw UFOs were now being confronted with Men in Black.
Okay. At the time of Mothman, most of the people that saw the Men in Black were typically people that had seen UFOs or the Mothman or some other highly strange activity. And the Men in Black seemed to be almost an extension of that.
Many times the Men in Black were they threatening, would you say, some of these people? Did they threaten them?
Okay. The Men in Black threatened many people. The Men in Black threatened many people. For example, they would come to someone that had seen a UFO and tell them not to speak of it. Or if they saw, say, like the Mothman, they would tell them not to talk about their sighting. Or in the case of Mary Hire, they go to her and they asked her what she would do if someone told her to stop talking about UFOs or stop reporting UFOs in the newspaper.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about Indrid Cold and Woodrow Derenberger with you guys. Can you tell me about this case? How did it start? How did the Woodrow Derenberger?
Okay. I'm trying to remember an exact date. It happened about a week before the...
Say early December.
Okay. In early November of
early December.
December?
Yeah.
Was it in November? Wasn't it like a week before the Mothman sighting?
It was probably around December 5th or 6th. I don't know, but it was in December.
Oh, I thought it was in... You sure?
Hey, well, it may have been late November.
It might have been before Mothman.
I think it was a week before Mothman.
Yeah. Why don't we just say around the same.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. During the time of the Mothman sightings in Parkersburg, West Virginia, about an hour outside of Point Pleasant, a shoe salesman. Wait a minute, he wasn't a shoe salesman. That was Tom York. That was Tom York. Sorry about that. All right. It was a vacuum cleaner. Yeah, sewing machines.
Can't even say.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Salesman.
All right, a salesman. Okay. All right. During the time of the Mothman sightings in, let's see, I have it.
You said up in Parkersburg about a mile. That was
Okay. During the time of the Mothman sightings in Parkersburg, West Virginia, about an hour outside of Point Pleasant, a salesman was traveling on Interstate 77, and his car was stopped in the road by a saucer that came down, and it covered about 10 feet off the ground, and his vehicle stopped, and he was approached by someone in a silver suit, and this spaceman communicated telepathically with Woody Derenberger, and he told him not to be afraid, and he gave him instructions.
What were the instructions you remember?
I mean, not to be afraid. I'm very familiar with the story, but I can't remember all the finer details of it.
Can you tell me, Woodrow Derenberger had multiple sightings. It wasn't like a one-time thing. It became like a lifestyle for him. Can you tell me about some of the large scale of things? What was happening to him after that first encounter? It happened many times. What was going on?
All right. Woodrow Derenberger owned a house in Parkersburg, Woodrow Derenberger owned a house near Parkersburg, and on a nightly basis, back in the late 60s, UFOs would be seen hovering over his property.
And can you tell me a little bit about, John, Woodrow Derenberger having multiple incidents with Indrid Cold? It wasn't just a one-time thing?
Okay. Over the course of the months that followed Woody Derenberger's initial sighting of Indrid Cold, he was visited by him many times, and supposedly at one point they even took him on a spaceship and took him to his planet Leonos.
Do you guys know that the night that Woodrow Derenberger's first encounter with Indrid Cold, where he stopped on the highway, that there were actually other witnesses to it? Like a couple people drove by and later said that they saw Derenberger.
Yeah, I heard that, but I don't know how much substantiation there is to that.
Okay. Can you guys tell me, according to Woodrow Derenberger, what did Indrid Cold look like? And if you could start it like that, too, according to Woodrow Derenberger, Indrid Cold.
Okay. According to Woody Derenberger, Indrid Cold was very tall, dark complected, very good looking, and he had a sinister air about him.
And John, can you tell me about Indrid Cold? It was said that he had like a really big smile on his face all the time, and when he spoke, his mouth didn't move. It was spoken through telepathy.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't envision that.
Black style.
Okay. One of the unsettling things about the Indrid Cold story is that when Indrid Cold spoke to Woody Derenberger, his mouth didn't move, and he usually had a fixed smile on his face, which in retrospect seems kind of creepy.
And can you tell me, Indrid Cold, one thing that's weird is Woodrow Derenberger described him as looking human, like very human looking, only just kind of off kilter. Can you tell me about Derenberger's description of Indrid Cold being very human-like, with just something wrong, a little bit something? He wasn't like an alien with 4 tentacles. It was kind of like he looked very human. Can you tell me about that?
Okay. One of the interesting things about Woody Derenberger's description of Indrid Cold is that he looked very human. He didn't look like you'd expect an extra. Let's start that over again. One of the interesting things about him, Indrid Cold. Okay. One of the interesting things about Woody Derenberger's description of Indrid Cold was that he looked very human, not at all like you'd expect an extraterrestrial to look.
So can you talk about that concept being kind of scary, that there could be like aliens kind of walking among us, like, and we don't even know it?
Okay.
Let me just check.
Yeah. Tell me about that idea. If Woodrow Derenberger's story is true, it's almost kind of scary because according to him, then there are extraterrestrials walking among us that we cannot really identify as something different.
Okay. In regards to Woody Derenberger's description of Indrid Cold looking human, with this in mind, it's possible that these aliens could be walking
among us.
Okay. In regards to Woody Derenberger's description of Indrid Cold as human looking, with this in mind, it's possible that aliens could be walking I keep getting tongue tied.
You can pick it up with aliens.
Now, in regards to Woody Derenberger's description of Indrid Cold as human looking, it's a possibility that aliens could be walking among human beings undetected.
I heard, I was covering one story where Derenberger goes to a psychiatrist to kind of make sure for his own self that he's kind of not crazy.
Yeah.
And he goes to a psychiatrist, and not only does the psychiatrist, give him like a clean bill of health, there's nothing wrong with him, but like months later, the psychiatrist comes forward and says that he himself was contacted by Indrid Cold after meeting Woodrow Derenberger.
I heard something about that.
I think the meeting. I think it took place somewhere down in Florida.
That was. They took him down to a military base in Florida, but the psychiatrist I think was based in Parkersburg or something.
Oh well,
I've heard that. Is it in Visitors from Leonos about the psychiatrist seeing?
I'm not sure, but I know he was taken down to Florida to some kind of military base.
Yeah, but that had nothing to do with the psychiatrist.
Okay.
Okay. One of the interesting things about the Woody Derenberger case was that he went to a psychiatrist to make sure that he was, indeed normal. And after the psychiatrist gave him a clean bill of health, he went on to later claim that he also had some sort of alien visitation.
Good.
I don't think that's going to be clear.
You want to just, when you say that he...
I know, I'll pick that up.
Okay.
It's the psychiatrist.
You're right.
I picked up
You're
on
right.
that,
You're right. You're right. All right.
Right, so the same exact thing.
I'll try to word it a little different.
The psychiatrist.
Okay. One of the interesting things about the Woody Derenberger case is that he went to a psychiatrist, to make sure he was insane. Okay. One of the interesting things about the Woody Derenberger case was that at one point Woody Derenberger went to a psychiatrist to have himself checked out, and the psychiatrist gave him a clean bill of health. A few months later, the psychiatrist came forward and claimed to have had some sort of visit. Okay. I'll keep going. I'll start it over. One of the interesting things about the Woody Derenberger case was that at one point he went to see a psychiatrist. Sorry, my voice broke.
Drink of water?
No. One of the interesting things about the Woody Derenberger case was that at one point he went to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist gave him a clean bill of health. But then a couple months later, the psychiatrist came forward and claimed to have had some sort of alien visitation himself.
Woodrow Derenberger, all these weird things, they didn't just happen.
This is for Tim.
Yeah. It didn't just, sure. The weird things that happened to Woody, it didn't just affect him, but it affected his family, it affected his job, everything. I eventually heard that, he ended up losing his job and he got a divorce. This whole thing affected everyone around him. Can you tell me about that? That the Indrid Cold experience with Woodrow Derenberger didn't just affect him directly, but it affected everyone involved with him, his family, his loved ones, he lost his job, divorce, all that stuff.
All right. Oh, thanks. Here. Sorry. Okay. After Woody Derenberger's initial encounter with Indrid Cold, his sighting and interaction with the Indrid Cold made the papers. And after that, let me start over. Okay. After Woody Derenberger's initial, After Woody Derenberger's initial encounter with Indrid Cold, Woody became sort of a celebrity in the papers, and he became quite popular. And a lot of people were drawn to his house outside of Parkersburg, and it became a great nuisance to Woody Derenberger and his family, because these people would be hanging out on his property waiting for UFOs to appear, and they would be there all hours of the day and night.
Speaking, John, tell me about the negative effects of Woodrow's experience with Indrid Cold. Not only affected him, but his family, his friends. He thought people were watching him, following him, and eventually it ended up hurting him more than it did anything to him. He lost his job, he lost his family. Can you tell me about that?
I'm not 100% sure exactly what happened. Timmy did.
I know.
He split from his wife at some point, but I'm not sure when he split up with his wife.
Yeah.
I know he lost his job and had to move. He lost his job and had to move.
Okay. Well, whatever you do know about it, whatever you remember, just tell me. What I'm trying to focus on is on the negative.
Well, he had lost his job and was forced to move several times.
Okay.
So John could touch on that.
Okay.
Tell me that. Yeah. Tell me about the negative effects that the Indrid Cold case had on Woody.
Okay. The Indrid Cold visitation. Okay. The Indrid Cold visitation had several negative effects on Woody Derenberger's life. He ended up losing his job and had to start over again.
You can pick up and had to move several times.
The Indrid Cold visitation had several negative effects on Woody Derenberger's life. He lost his job and he had to move several times afterwards.
So I'm going to ask you some questions about the Silver Bridge. So December 15th, 1967, a year to the date of the first big sighting of the Mothman by the Scarberries and Mallets. It's the bridge's 39th year in existence. Before going into the collapse, can you just tell me, what was it like that night? What kind of night was it before the collapse? Were there a lot of cars on the bridge?
Okay.
Tell me about it.
All right. On the night of December 15th, 1967, right before the bridge collapsed, the weather was cold. The bridge was crowded with rush hour traffic, Christmas shoppers. And there was a rumor that there was a traffic light at one end of the bridge, and the light was extremely long, and it caused the traffic to back up on the bridge. And the bridge collapsed around 5 minutes after 5.
The Silver Bridge collapse was a major disaster, and it was magnified because Point Pleasant is a small community. Can you tell me about how the fact that Point Pleasant being a small town and 46 people lost their lives on the bridge, that it was devastating to the community because everybody knew somebody who was on the bridge, basically.
All right, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I guess I'll take that one. When the bridge collapsed in Point Pleasant, it started. 46 people did die, right?
46.
Okay, I want to get that right. All right. When the bridge collapsed in Point Pleasant, 46 people died, which was devastating to the community because almost everyone in town knew someone had died. So it was a big shock to the whole community.
Can you tell me about the fall of the bridge? What did it look like? Did the whole bridge fall at once? Did it fall in pieces? How long did it last? How long did it take for the bridge to fall? Were cars falling off that hit the water? Things like that. Tell me what it would have looked like.
Some expertise, actually.
I could touch on that. Regarding the collapse of the Silver Bridge, I've heard that I've heard secondhand reports from eyewitnesses that when they saw the bridge fall, it looked like dominoes falling over.
And after the bridge had fallen, can you just tell me about the damages that were done? How many people lost their life? If you know, were there any, some people survived the fall. Just tell me about the after effects of the bridge and tell me about the effects it had on the community.
All right. So you collapsed of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, and December 1967 traumatized the town, and 46 people lost their lives.
After the investigation of the bridge is done, can you tell me what was found to cause the collapse?
Okay. After an investigation was done on the Silver Bridge, after the collapse, it was found that a defective I-beam was on the bridge, was cracked, and that's what was. I'm sorry. After the collapse of the Silver Bridge, an investigation was conducted, and it was discovered that a faulty I-beam was responsible for the collapse of the Silver Bridge.
Was the Silver Bridge kind of like a climax for all the weird things that were going on before? Because I heard that once the Silver Bridge fell, Mothman sightings died down, UFO sightings died down, all the weird stuff kind of left. So can you tell me about the Silver Bridge being kind of like a climax for all these weird things, and that they stopped after it fell?
Okay.
I don't think they stopped. I think they sort of
they kind of tapered off.
Tell me about that then.
All right. Okay. In November of 1966, wait a minute. On November 15th of 1966 was Mothman's first sighting in Point Pleasant. And 13 months later to the day, December 15th, 1967 is when the Silver Bridge collapsed. And it was kind of like a climax to all the weird, bizarre activity that's been happening in the area. And after the bridge collapsed, the weird activity seemed to taper off.
There was a rumor that before the bridge fell, that there was like a boom sound, like a sonic boom, like an explosion. Some people had said they had heard like a whistling or a whooshing sound, and then an explosion of the bridge. If that's true, then that would kind of go against the I-bar theory. And a lot of people, I think, some people today still even don't accept the I-bar theory. Can you know about that rumor at all?
I don't know much about that.
Okay.
Did you hear anything about the Men in Black being seen on the bridge?
Yeah. Yeah, are you familiar with that? You know about that a little bit?
John knows a little bit more about than I do.
There was a rumor that the Men in Black were on the bridge the day before, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Okay. The day before the bridge collapsed. Okay, wait a minute. Okay. There's a rumor that the day before the bridge collapsed, men were seen climbing around on
the other side of the bridge.
It's in focus. Okay. There's a rumor that the day before the bridge collapsed, strange men were climbing around on the other. Man.
On the underside of the bridge, man.
You're getting tongue-tied. There's a rumor that the day before the bridge collapsed, strange-looking men were climbing around on the underside
of the bridge.
Underside of the bridge. Okay, let me go again. There's a rumor that the day before the bridge collapsed, strange-looking men were seen climbing.
Do you want me to say it?
No, I'll say it. There's a rumor that the day before the bridge collapsed, there were strange-looking men seen climbing around on the underside of the bridge. There's a rumor that the day before the Silver Bridge collapsed, strange-looking men were seen climbing around on the underside of the bridge. And because of that, there's a lot of speculation that the paranormal is somehow tied into the collapse of the bridge.
Do you think that, from your guys' experience, before I ask that question, there was also another rumor that the Mothman was spotted near the bridge before it fell. Are you familiar with that at all?
I seem to recall a rumor that somebody saw a Mothman flying over the bridge or something the day it fell. I don't know how much truth there is. I don't know how substantiated it is. It's something somebody said.
And, well, you just told me about the rumor of the Men in Black. Maybe I can tie them two together. Can you tell me about the rumor of the Mothman flying over?
Okay.
But make sure you say a rumor or whatever.
Okay.
Don't say it's a fact.
Okay.
You're to start with. There's also a rumor.
Okay, I got it. Okay, along with the rumor of people having reported strange men in black climbing on the underside of the bridge, there was also reports of someone seeing like a winged man flying back and forth across the Ohio River on the day the bridge collapsed.
Can you tell me about after the Silver Bridge fell and the explanation of the I-bar came out? Did a lot of people accept that as the result, or did people still not believe it? Just because they had thought, there was something paranormal responsible? Did they buy the I-bar story?
Okay.
I don't know if they did or not.
I'd say they would. I'd say they did.
I think a lot of people probably did buy it, yeah.
Okay. did a lot of these things like the Silver Bridge and the Mothman and the curse and UFOs, did you, in your opinion, did it divide the town? Like there was some, like when I came here to the festival, I was talking to some people who believed it and some people who didn't. And it seems like they're complete opposites. Like it seemed like it divided the town a bit. Would you say that these things maybe could broke the town up a little bit, like divided some people in the way they believed in things, and those who believed in it and those who didn't? Did it do that to the town at all?
I don't think so.
Actually, in light of the in light of the bridge collapsing, I think the bridge disaster kind of unified the town, if anything.
Okay. Okay, so we're almost done with this, and then we'll go outside and do the other stuff. Do you guys, you've done a lot of research on this thing. Do you think this mystery is ever going to be solved, or is this case too complex? Does it go beyond kind of what we are keeping?
I can cover it.
This will ever be solved?
Yeah, I can cover it. The Mothman case is so mysterious and complex that it's likely that it'll never be solved.
There are many theories as to what Mothman was, and people will try to rationalize all the strange stuff that's been happening in Point Pleasant since around the time of the collapse of the Silver Bridge. But in my opinion, I think it's just way too complex for simple science to explain it away.
And have you guys come up with your own conclusion on what you thought Mothman could have been? Do you have an opinion?
Actually, we did have an opinion on it that Mothman was being from another dimension, but we kind of learned more information since then about something along the lines of a being from the group consciousness. That it's also a possibility.
Okay, I guess I can cover it.
Sure. Tell me some more about that.
Okay, we've sort of come to the conclusion that Mothman was either extra dimensional or like a tulpa projected into reality from the group consciousness of the human race.
I already asked you guys to describe the Mothman, what it looked like, right?
Yeah.
Went through that. Okay. When it comes to this case, in believing the eyewitnesses, like a lot of people from the research I've read and things like that, back when they reported it, most people based their opinion on if they believed an eyewitness or not. They believed them by kind of just their instincts. Their, like if someone came to them and told them they saw the Mothman, it was believed because they were so scared. Can you just tell me about the eyewitnesses that are credible and that are respected? Is that because the truth is kind of stamped on their face? It's in the fear that they have? Would you say? Like even the witnesses that you come across, the eyewitnesses that you come across and talk to, do you find that the more credible ones are the ones that, they still seem scared about?
Anyone who really still seems scared was in the Scarberry, the one people I've talked to.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if I covered his question.
Last question. Just tell me some of the things. We've gone over what Mothman looks like. There's a lot of controversy, and a lot of people have diverse opinions on what Mothman was. Some people think it was a demon. Some people think it was an angel. Some people think it was an extraterrestrial. Some people think it was a bird. Can you just list for me, as many as you can think of, what people have thought Mothman has been over the years?
Okay. I'll take care of that. There's been many theories on what Mothman... Okay. Sorry about it. My brain is scattered. There's been many theories on what Mothman was. Some of these are that he could have been a demon, an angel, a tulpa, an alien, or even an alien's pet.
And can you tell me about some of the things that you've heard too in your research? What does people explain Mothman as being?
Along with the theory that Mothman could have been an angel, a demon, or a tulpa, there's also widespread belief that it was nothing more than someone in a suit or some kind of bird, rare bird such as the sandhill crane. There's also rumors that it was like something that got mutated from the chemicals in the TNT area.
Okay, I think that's it. Is there anything that you guys think that I left out that's important to the whole story? Anything that I missed?
Not really.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Eyes of the Mothman, the podcast. For more information about our program, or to find out where you can watch the original documentary film or purchase a limited edition signed DVD copy, please visit www.eyesofthemothman.com.